Hello there, and welcome to the Whispers of Science, where curiosity gets cozy and science takes the scenic route to slumber. Tonight's gentle journey takes us to one of Earth's most mysterious and beautiful frontiers, the Arctic. But we're not talking about the blazing summer months when the sun refuses to set. No, we're diving into the deep, quiet darkness of the Arctic night, where temperatures plummet, stars dance across endless skies, and life finds the most extraordinary ways to survive in what seems like an impossible world. Before we begin our quiet expedition to the top of the world, I'd love to know where you're listening from tonight and what time it is in your corner of the globe. It's rather fitting, isn't it, that we're exploring the land of endless night while you're perhaps settling into your own evening routine, wherever that might be. If you find this voyage soothing, intriguing, or just a lovely way to unwind after a long day, I'd be ever so grateful if you gave the video a gentle thumbs up and perhaps subscribed. It helps this little corner of calm reach others who might need a peaceful pause in their day. Now, I do hope this isn't so fascinating that it keeps you awake, but if it does, well, at least you'll have learned something about one of the most remarkable places on our planet before you drift off. So settle in, slow your thoughts, and let's begin our journey to a world where darkness isn't something to fear, but something to marvel at. Because somewhere between the frozen silence and the dancing lights lies a story of survival, adaptation, and beauty that defies everything we think we know about life on Earth. The Arctic night isn't just the absence of daylight. It's a completely different world, one that operates by rules so foreign to our experience that it might as well be another planet. During the polar night, which can last anywhere from a few weeks to several months, depending on how far north you venture, the sun doesn't just set early or rise late, it doesn't rise at all. Picture that for a moment. Imagine waking up day after day to a world bathed in twilight, where noon looks like dusk and midnight feels no different from morning. This isn't just a quirk of geography, it's the result of our planet's elegant dance around the sun, tilted at just the right angle to create this extraordinary phenomenon. As Earth travels its yearly orbit, the Arctic tilts away from our star, plunging the northernmost regions into a darkness so complete that it seems almost mystical. But here's the beautiful contradiction. This darkness isn't empty. It's alive, vibrant, and teeming with activity that would astonish anyone brave enough to witness it. The Arctic night begins gradually, like a curtain slowly falling across the world's stage. First, the days grow shorter, sunset arriving earlier each evening, until eventually the sun skims along the horizon like a shy performer, touching the edge of the world, but never quite climbing into the sky. The light takes on an ethereal quality during those twilight weeks, painting everything in shades of deep blue, purple, and silver. It's a photographer's dream and a poet's inspiration, this liminal time when day and night blur into something entirely new. But as the weeks pass, even this gentle light fades and true polar night begins. The darkness that follows isn't the familiar darkness of a summer evening or even a winter night in temperate climates. It's profound, encompassing, and strangely peaceful. Yet within this darkness, the Arctic reveals its most spectacular secrets. The aurora borealis, those dancing curtains of green, blue, and pink light, become the night sky's main attraction, painting the heavens with colors so vivid They seem almost artificial. These northern lights aren't just beautiful, they're a reminder of the invisible forces constantly at work around our planet. High above the Arctic, charged particles from the sun collide with Earth's magnetic field, creating these luminous displays that can stretch for hundreds of miles across the sky. To the indigenous peoples of the Arctic, these lights have been companions, guides, and sources of wonder for thousands of years. They've woven them into stories, used them as navigation aids, and found in them a connection to the cosmic forces that govern our world. The stars, too, become more prominent during the Arctic night. Without the interference of city lights, or even the gentle glow of twilight, the night sky opens up like a vast, glittering tapestry. Constellations that are barely visible in more populated areas blaze with startling clarity. The Milky Way stretches across the heavens like a river of light, and on the clearest nights, you can see so many stars that they seem to blur together into a shimmering dome of silver dust. This celestial display has been crucial to Arctic peoples for millennia. Before GPS and modern navigation, the stars were their roadmap across the featureless ice. They learned to read the night sky like a book, using the positions of constellations to guide their journeys across vast expanses of snow and ice. The North Star, Polaris, became a faithful companion, always pointing the way home, no matter how far their travels took them. But the Arctic night isn't just about what you can see in the sky. It's about what happens on the ground, in the snow, and beneath the ice. This is where the real magic begins, where life demonstrates its extraordinary ability to adapt to conditions that would challenge even our most advanced technology. The cold during Arctic night isn't just chilly, it's bone deep, soul touching cold that can reach temperatures of minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit or lower. That's cold enough to freeze exposed skin in minutes, cold enough to make metal brittle, cold enough to turn your breath into instant ice crystals that tinkle as they fall to the ground. Yet in this seemingly hostile environment, life not only survives but thrives. Arctic foxes, their summer coats transformed into thick, luxurious white fur, hunt beneath the stars with a patience and skill that borders on the supernatural. Their hearing is so acute that they can detect the movement of lemmings beneath several feet of snow. They'll stand motionless for long minutes, head tilted, listening to the faint sounds of life moving through tunnels in the snow, then suddenly pounce with pinpoint accuracy, diving headfirst through the snow to emerge with their prey. These foxes have evolved remarkable adaptations for Arctic life. Their compact bodies minimize heat loss, their furry paws act like natural snowshoes, and their thick tails serve as built-in scarves that they can wrap around themselves for extra warmth. During the harshest parts of winter, they'll even tunnel into snowdrifts to create warm shelters, using the insulating properties of snow itself to survive temperatures that would be lethal to most mammals. The snow, too, is far more complex than it appears. What looks like a uniform white blanket is actually a layered, structured environment that supports an entire ecosystem. Beneath the surface, small mammals like lemmings and voles create extensive tunnel networks, living in a relatively warm microenvironment, insulated from the brutal cold above. The temperature difference between the surface and these subnivean spaces can be 40 degrees or more, creating a hidden world of moderate temperatures even in the depths of Arctic winter. Plants, too, have found ways to survive the Arctic night. They may not be actively growing during the coldest months, but they're far from dormant. Arctic willows, no taller than your ankle, have root systems that extend deep into the permafrost, storing energy and nutrients that will fuel rapid growth when the sun returns. Some plants actually continue photosynthesis at temperatures well below freezing, taking advantage of any available light, no matter how dim. The very air itself becomes different during Arctic night. It's so clear and dry that sounds carry for extraordinary distances. A conversation that would be muffled by humidity and atmospheric interference in temperate climates can be heard clearly across miles of frozen landscape. The silence, when it comes, is profound beyond description. It's not just the absence of sound, but the presence of absolute quiet, a silence so complete that you can hear your own heartbeat, your own breathing, the tiny sounds your body makes simply by being alive. This silence has a psychological effect that's difficult to describe to someone who hasn't experienced it. It's simultaneously peaceful and overwhelming, comforting and slightly unsettling. For those who live in the Arctic, this silence becomes a companion, a backdrop against which the small sounds of life, a fox's footstep, a raven's call, the crack of shifting ice, become magnified and meaningful. The indigenous peoples of the Arctic have developed an intimate relationship with this night world that spans thousands of years. The Inuit, Sami, and other Arctic cultures don't see the polar night as a time of hardship to be endured, but as a different season to be embraced, each with its own rhythms, activities, and gifts. They've learned to read the subtle signs that indicate weather changes, the type of snow that's good for building, the ice conditions that make travel safe or dangerous. Their languages contain dozens of words for different types of snow and ice, each describing conditions that could mean the difference between safety and danger, success and failure in hunting, or comfort and misery in shelter building. Where English speakers might see only white, Arctic peoples see a spectrum of conditions, each with its own properties, uses, and meanings. The social aspects of Arctic night are equally fascinating. In traditional Arctic communities, the long darkness becomes a time for storytelling, tool-making, and strengthening social bonds. Extended families gather together, sharing warmth, food, and the accumulated wisdom of generations. The stories told during these long nights aren't just entertainment, they're education, cultural preservation, and psychological survival, all wrapped together in narratives that have been refined over centuries. These stories often feature the aurora borealis, which different cultures interpret in various ways. Some see them as the spirits of ancestors dancing across the sky. Others view them as pathways between worlds, or as signs of good fortune for hunters. The lights become characters in epic tales, guides for lost travelers, or omens of important events. In this way, the Arctic night becomes not just a physical experience, but a cultural and spiritual one as well. The darkness also affects human physiology in profound ways. Our bodies, evolved for the rhythms of day and night, must adapt to months without sunlight. Melatonin production, normally regulated by light and darkness, can become disrupted. Vitamin D levels, typically maintained through sun exposure, must be sustained through diet and stored reserves. The circadian rhythms that govern sleep, alertness, and countless biological processes must recalibrate to a world where traditional time cues simply don't exist. Yet people not only survive these changes, but often report a different kind of well being during the polar night. There's a slowing down, a deepening, a shift toward introspection and contemplation that's difficult to achieve in the bright, busy world of constant daylight. Many describe a sense of being more connected to natural rhythms, more aware of their own bodies and minds, more attuned to the subtle changes in their environment. The returning light, when it finally comes, is greeted with celebrations that span cultures and centuries. The first glimpse of the sun after months of darkness is a moment of pure joy, a reminder that the cycle continues, that spring will return, that life persists even in the darkest times. These celebrations aren't just parties, they're affirmations of resilience, community, and the fundamental human ability to find hope and beauty, even in the most challenging circumstances. Modern science has only recently begun to appreciate the complexity and beauty of Arctic night ecosystems. Researchers working in these conditions face challenges that would test the limits of human endurance and technological capability. Equipment fails in the extreme cold, batteries drain rapidly, and simple tasks become monumental challenges. Yet the discoveries they've made have revolutionized our understanding of life's adaptability and the intricate connections that bind ecosystems together. Polar bears, perhaps the most iconic Arctic animals, demonstrate remarkable adaptations to the polar night. Their black skin absorbs any available heat, while their transparent fur creates an insulating layer that traps warm air close to their bodies. Their huge paws act as snowshoes, distributing their weight across thin ice, and their incredible sense of smell allows them to detect seals beneath several feet of snow and ice. During the darkest months, pregnant females dig dens in snowdrifts where they give birth to cubs, nursing them through the harshest part of winter while living off their own body fat. The marine environment beneath the Arctic ice is equally remarkable. Even when the surface is locked in darkness and cold, the ocean below teems with life. Seals maintain breathing holes through ice that can be several feet thick, using their claws and the warmth of their breath to keep these vital passages open. Arctic cod school beneath the ice, feeding on tiny organisms that themselves feed on algae growing on the underside of the ice sheet. This under ice ecosystem supports a complex food web that includes whales, walruses, and countless species of fish, invertebrates, and marine mammals. The ice itself becomes habitat with algae, bacteria, and small animals living within the crystal structure, creating a three-dimensional ecosystem that extends from the ocean floor to the surface of the ice. The sound of the Arctic night deserves special mention. While often profoundly quiet, it's punctuated by sounds that are unique to this environment. The ice makes music as it shifts and settles, creating groans, cracks, and pops that echo across the landscape. These sounds aren't just noise, they're information, telling experienced Arctic travelers about ice conditions, weather changes, and safe passage routes. When wind across the snow creates its own symphony, from the gentle whisper of light breezes to the howling roar of Arctic storms. Each sound carries information about wind speed, direction, and the likelihood of weather changes. The footsteps of animals on different types of snow create distinct sounds that experienced hunters can identify from remarkable distances. Even human activities create unique sounds in the Arctic night. The crunch of boots on snow, The scrape of skis or sleds, the crack of wood in extreme cold, all become amplified and significant in the clear, dry air. These sounds can carry for miles, serving as communication methods between hunters, warnings of approaching weather, or simply companionship in the vast loneliness of the polar night. The psychological effects of the Arctic night extend beyond simple adaptation to darkness. Many people report a heightened sense of awareness, a sharpening of senses that aren't visual. Hearing becomes more acute, the sense of smell more sensitive, and the ability to detect changes in temperature, humidity, and air pressure more refined. It's as if the absence of light forces other senses to compensate, creating a more complete but different way of experiencing the world. This sensory adaptation has practical implications for survival, but it also creates a different kind of consciousness, a way of being in the world that's more intuitive, more connected to immediate physical reality. Many Arctic peoples describe this as a form of meditation, a natural mindfulness that comes from being fully present in an environment that demands complete attention. The Arctic night also affects the perception of time. Without the normal cues of sunrise and sunset, days can blur together in ways that are both disorienting and liberating. Time becomes more fluid, measured not by clock hours but by activities, needs, and natural rhythms. Meals happen when hunger strikes, sleep comes when fatigue overwhelms, and activities are guided by weather conditions and opportunity rather than arbitrary schedules. This different relationship with time can be profoundly restful for people accustomed to the rigid scheduling of modern life. There's a freedom in allowing natural rhythms to guide daily activities, in sleeping when tired and waking when rested, in eating when hungry, rather than when the clock demands. Many visitors to the Arctic report that this temporal flexibility is one of the most refreshing aspects of the experience. The night sky during Arctic winter offers astronomical viewing opportunities that are simply impossible anywhere else on Earth. The combination of extreme darkness, clear air, and stable atmospheric conditions creates viewing conditions that professional astronomers can only dream of. Stars that are barely visible in temperate latitudes shine with startling brightness. Planets appear as distinct disks rather than points of light. The Milky Way stretches across the entire sky with such clarity that individual star clouds and dark nebulae are visible to the naked eye. For centuries, Arctic peoples used this celestial clarity for navigation, timekeeping, and seasonal planning. They developed sophisticated understanding of stellar movements, planetary cycles, and the relationship between celestial events and terrestrial seasons. This astronomical knowledge was integrated into their daily lives, spiritual practices, and cultural traditions in ways that connected them intimately to the cosmos. Modern light pollution has made such clear night skies increasingly rare, but the Arctic night preserves this connection to the universe. Standing beneath such a sky, surrounded by the profound silence of the polar landscape, many people report a sense of cosmic perspective that's difficult to achieve in more populated areas. It's a reminder of our place in the universe, of the vast scales of space and time that dwarf our daily concerns while simultaneously connecting us to something much larger than ourselves. The returning light, when it finally comes after months of darkness, arrives gradually and dramatically. First, there's a brightening of the southern horizon, a glow that hints at the sun's presence below the horizon. This twilight period can last for weeks, with the light growing stronger each day, but the sun remaining hidden. Colors during this time are extraordinary, painting the snow and ice in shades of pink, orange, and gold that seem almost impossibly vivid against the white landscape. When the sun finally appears, even briefly above the horizon for the first time in months, it's a moment of profound celebration and relief. The light may last only minutes on that first day, but it represents the turning point, the promise that winter is loosening its grip and that the cycle of seasons continues. This moment, observed and celebrated by Arctic peoples for thousands of years, represents hope, renewal, and the fundamental resilience of life itself. As we drift toward the end of our journey through the Arctic night, it's worth reflecting on what this remarkable phenomenon teaches us about adaptation, resilience, and the beauty that can be found in the most challenging circumstances. The Arctic night isn't just an absence of light, it's a presence unto itself, a teacher that shows us how life finds ways to thrive in conditions that seem impossible, how communities can strengthen in times of hardship, and how beauty can emerge from the most unlikely places. So tonight, as you settle into your own darkness, perhaps you'll think of the Arctic night and the extraordinary world it contains. A world where silence speaks volumes, where darkness reveals hidden light, where the cold creates its own warmth through the closeness of community and the ingenuity of adaptation. It's a reminder that even in our darkest moments, even when the sun seems to have disappeared forever, there are still stars to guide us, still beauty to discover, and still reasons to hope for the return of light. Sleep well, fellow traveler, and perhaps in your dreams, you'll find yourself beneath the dancing aurora, listening to the music of the shifting ice, and discovering that sometimes the most profound journeys happen not in the blazing light of day, but in the quiet, mysterious embrace of the night. As we settle deeper into our journey through the Arctic night, we find ourselves standing at the threshold of something truly remarkable. The darkness we've explored, with its dancing auroras and star-filled skies, becomes not just a backdrop, but a living laboratory where science unfolds in the most extraordinary ways. Here, beneath the endless polar night, researchers and scientists have made discoveries that reshape our understanding of life itself, discoveries that whisper secrets about resilience, adaptation, and the profound interconnectedness of all living things. The Arctic night transforms ordinary scientists into sleepy explorers of the extraordinary. Picture, if you will, a research station perched on the edge of the world, its warm yellow lights glowing against the vast indigo darkness. Inside, bundled figures lean over microscopes and data screens, their breath visible in the crisp air as they study phenomena that exist nowhere else on Earth. These are the scientists of the Arctic, working through the endless night to unlock mysteries that have puzzled humanity for generations. One of the most fascinating discoveries emerging from Arctic night research involves what scientists call cryptobiosis, a state of suspended animation that some organisms enter during the harshest conditions. Tiny creatures called tardigrades, invisible to the naked eye but mighty in their resilience, can survive temperatures that would instantly kill most life forms. During the polar night, when temperatures plummet to levels that seem incompatible with existence itself, these microscopic marvels essentially pause their biological processes, waiting patiently for conditions to improve. The tardigrades aren't alone in their remarkable survival strategies. Arctic researchers have discovered bacteria living deep beneath the ice that have remained dormant for hundreds of thousands of years, perhaps even longer. When brought to warmer conditions in laboratory settings, these ancient microorganisms spring back to life as if no time has passed at all. They carry within their cellular structures the memory of ancient Arctic environments, living libraries of climate history written in the language of DNA and preserved in the eternal cold of the polar night. But the Arctic night reveals its secrets not just in the microscopic realm, but in the grand symphony of atmospheric science as well. The aurora borealis, those ethereal curtains of green and gold that dance across the polar sky, serve as a visible manifestation of invisible forces at work. Solar particles, traveling millions of miles through the vacuum of space, collide with Earth's magnetic field and atmosphere in a cosmic ballet that transforms energy into light. Scientists studying these phenomena during the long Arctic night have uncovered connections between solar activity and climate patterns that influence weather systems across the globe. The research stations scattered across the Arctic landscape become beacons of human curiosity in the vast darkness. Each one tells its own story of scientific dedication and discovery. Some focus on ice core research, drilling deep into ancient ice to extract cylinders that contain atmospheric samples from thousands of years past. Each layer of ice holds within it tiny bubbles of ancient air, preserving the chemical composition of Earth's atmosphere from times when woolly mammoths roamed the tundra and early humans were just beginning to discover fire. The ice cores reveal a climate history written in crystalline chapters, each one more fascinating than the last. Scientists can read these frozen archives like books, discovering periods of warming and cooling, volcanic eruptions that darkened skies across continents, and even evidence of cosmic events that left their mark in the ice. The polar night provides the perfect conditions for this delicate work, as the stable temperatures and minimal human activity ensure that the ancient ice remains undisturbed and pristine. Perhaps most intriguingly, the Arctic night has become a laboratory for studying the effects of extreme light conditions on living organisms. Researchers have discovered that the absence of sunlight triggers remarkable adaptations in both plants and animals. Some Arctic plants, for instance, have evolved the ability to photosynthesize using the faint light of the aurora or even starlight, pushing the boundaries of what we thought possible for photosynthetic life. The human researchers themselves become subjects of study in this unique environment. Scientists monitoring their own circadian rhythms during the polar night have discovered that the human body's internal clock can adapt in surprising ways to the absence of natural light cues. Some researchers report experiencing an almost meditative state of consciousness during the darkest months, a heightened awareness and focus that seems to emerge from the profound stillness of the Arctic night. Sleep studies conducted in the Arctic have revealed fascinating insights into how extreme environments affect rest and dreaming. Researchers report unusually vivid dreams during the polar night, often featuring themes of light, warmth, and natural cycles. These dreams seem to serve as the mind's way of maintaining connection to the rhythms of life, even when external cues are absent. The quality of sleep itself changes too, often becoming deeper and more restorative, as if the body recognizes the need for enhanced recovery in such challenging conditions. The collaborative nature of Arctic research creates a unique scientific community where knowledge flows freely across disciplines and nationalities. During the long polar night, researchers from different countries and fields of study gather in the warm common areas of research stations, sharing hot tea and extraordinary discoveries. A glaciologist might find themselves in deep conversation with a marine biologist about the interconnections between ice formation and ocean currents, while an atmospheric physicist shares insights about aurora formation with a botanist studying Arctic plant adaptations. Technology plays a crucial role in these Arctic discoveries, but it too must adapt to the extreme conditions. Instruments designed to function in temperate climates often fail in the intense cold of the polar night, leading researchers to develop innovative solutions. Solar panels become useless during the months of darkness, so alternative energy sources like wind power and geothermal systems become essential. Even the simplest tasks, like taking notes or operating cameras, require special cold weather adaptations and techniques. The data collected during these long months of darkness contributes to our understanding of global climate systems in ways that research conducted in more temperate regions simply cannot. The Arctic serves as Earth's air conditioning system, and changes in polar ice and temperature patterns have far reaching effects on weather patterns, ocean currents, and climate stability worldwide. The scientists working through the polar night are not just studying a remote region, they're monitoring the pulse of the entire planet. One of the most profound aspects of Arctic night research is how it changes the researchers themselves. Many report a deep spiritual connection to the landscape and a heightened appreciation for the delicate balance of life on Earth. The experience of living and working in such an extreme environment, surrounded by beauty and harshness in equal measure, often leads to insights that extend far beyond the realm of science into philosophy and personal growth. The Arctic night also serves as a testing ground for technologies and techniques that may one day be used in even more extreme environments. Space agencies study how humans adapt to the polar night as preparation for long-duration missions to Mars or other planets where natural light cycles are absent or drastically different from Earth's. The psychological and physiological adaptations observed in Arctic researchers provide valuable insights for designing life support systems and mission protocols for future space exploration. As we consider these remarkable scientific endeavors unfolding in the Arctic darkness, we're reminded that some of the most important discoveries happen not in the bright lights of laboratory buildings, but in the quiet, contemplative spaces where researchers can observe and listen to the subtle whispers of the natural world. The Arctic night, with its profound stillness and unique conditions, creates an environment where both the phenomena being studied and the minds studying them can reveal their deepest secrets. The legacy of Arctic night research extends far beyond the specific discoveries made in any single expedition or study. It represents humanity's enduring curiosity and determination to understand our world, even in its most challenging and remote corners. These dedicated scientists, working through months of darkness, carry forward a tradition of exploration and discovery that connects us to the earliest humans who looked up at the night sky and wondered about their place in the cosmos. In the end, the Arctic night teaches us that darkness is not the absence of discovery, but often the condition that makes the most profound revelations possible. Just as the aurora can only be seen against the backdrop of a dark sky, many of the most important scientific insights emerge from the quiet, patient observation of phenomena that might be invisible in the bright light of day. The scientists of the Arctic remind us that sometimes, to truly see, we must embrace the darkness and allow it to reveal its hidden wonders. The Arctic night has always been a laboratory for testing the limits of human resilience and ingenuity. But as we delve deeper into this world of perpetual darkness, we discover that the most remarkable innovations often emerge not from grand laboratories or sprawling research facilities, but from the quiet determination of communities who have learned to thrive where others might merely survive. In the research stations scattered across the polar landscape, scientists work by the glow of artificial lights, their days structured not by sunrise and sunset, but by the rhythms of discovery. The absence of natural light creates a unique environment for human creativity and problem solving. Without the distractions of changing daylight, researchers often report entering states of profound focus, where hours can pass unnoticed as they pursue answers to questions that have puzzled humanity for generations. Dr. Sarah Chen, an atmospheric physicist who spent 18 months at a research station in northern Greenland, describes the experience as both isolating and intensely collaborative. When you're surrounded by darkness for months at a time, you develop a different relationship with time and space, as she explains. The usual markers of daily life disappear, and you're left with pure intention. What matters becomes crystal clear. This clarity of purpose has led to some extraordinary innovations born from necessity and nurtured by the unique conditions of the Arctic night. Solar panels designed to capture the faintest traces of reflected starlight. Heating systems that harness the thermal properties of ice itself. Communication devices that can penetrate the electromagnetic interference created by aurora activity. Each solution represents not just technical advancement, but a fundamental reimagining of how we interact with our environment. The indigenous communities of the Arctic have long understood this principle. The Inuit concept of sila, often translated as weather or climate, encompasses a much broader understanding of the relationship between humans and their environment. It recognizes that true adaptation requires not just surviving harsh conditions, but finding ways to live harmoniously within them. Traditional Inuit snow houses, or igloos, represent perhaps the most elegant example of this philosophy. Built entirely from the material that defines the Arctic landscape, these structures create warm, livable spaces using only snow, body heat, and centuries of accumulated knowledge about thermal dynamics. The spiral construction technique distributes weight evenly, while the dome shape provides maximum strength with minimal materials. Inside, a carefully maintained temperature gradient keeps the inner walls just below freezing, preventing collapse while maintaining comfortable living conditions. Modern architects and engineers studying these traditional techniques have discovered principles that are now being applied to contemporary building design. The concept of thermal zoning, where different areas of a structure are maintained at different temperatures based on their function, has roots in traditional Arctic construction methods. Similarly, The use of locally available materials to create high performance building envelopes reflects an understanding of sustainability that predates modern environmental movements by millennia. But innovation in the Arctic night extends far beyond architecture and engineering. The prolonged darkness has profound effects on human psychology and creativity, effects that researchers are only beginning to understand. Without the circadian cues provided by natural light cycles, the human brain adapts in remarkable ways. Some individuals report enhanced pattern recognition abilities. Others describe periods of intense creative output that seem to emerge from the depths of the polar night itself. Musicians who have spent extended periods in Arctic research stations often speak of compositions that seem to write themselves during the darkest months. The absence of familiar sounds, the way noise travels differently in extremely cold air, the subtle acoustic properties of ice and snow all contribute to a sonic landscape that inspires new forms of musical expression. Some composers have created entire works based on the rhythm of ice formation, the whisper of wind across snow, or the ethereal harmonics of aurora activity translated into audible frequencies. Visual artists, too, find inspiration in the unique qualities of Arctic light and darkness. The subtle gradations of blue that mark the transition between day and night during polar twilight create a palette that exists nowhere else on Earth. Photographers working in these conditions often discover that their most compelling images emerge not from dramatic sunrise or sunset shots, but from the quiet, mysterious light that suffuses the landscape during the deepest winter months. The psychological effects of extended darkness also influence scientific thinking in unexpected ways. Researchers often report that their most significant insights come not during the busy summer months when the station is fully staffed and active, but during the quiet isolation of winter. The absence of external stimulation seems to allow the mind to make connections that might otherwise remain hidden. Complex problems that seemed intractable during the light months suddenly reveal elegant solutions during the depths of winter. This phenomenon has led some research institutions to deliberately schedule their most challenging theoretical work during the darkest periods of the year. Mathematicians working on long-standing proofs, physicists developing new models of quantum behavior, and climatologists analyzing decades of data often find that the contemplative atmosphere of the polar night provides the perfect environment for breakthrough thinking. The technology developed for Arctic research has also found applications far beyond the polar regions. Satellite communication systems designed to function in the electromagnetic chaos of aurora zones now help maintain connections in other challenging environments. Battery technologies developed to function in extreme cold have improved the reliability of devices used everywhere, from Antarctic research stations to urban emergency response systems. Materials science breakthroughs achieved through studying ice formation have led to advances in everything from construction materials to medical devices. Perhaps most importantly, the Arctic night teaches us about the power of community and cooperation. When external conditions are harsh and unforgiving, human connections become more vital than ever. Research teams that might struggle with interpersonal dynamics in more comfortable settings often develop profound bonds during the shared experience of polar winter. The knowledge that everyone depends on everyone else for survival creates a culture of mutual support and shared responsibility that transcends professional and personal boundaries. Indigenous Arctic communities have always understood this principle. Traditional hunting and fishing expeditions required careful coordination and absolute trust among participants. The sharing of resources during lean periods ensured the survival of the entire community. Decision making processes emphasized consensus and collective wisdom rather than individual authority. These social innovations, refined over thousands of years, offer valuable lessons for modern communities facing their own challenges. The concept of Ubuntu, though originating from a different cultural context, finds expression in Arctic communities through practices that prioritize collective well being over individual advancement. When food is scarce, it is shared. When knowledge is gained, it is passed on. When someone struggles, others step in to help. This isn't merely altruism, it's practical wisdom born from the understanding that individual survival is impossible without community resilience. Modern research teams are beginning to formally adopt some of these traditional approaches to community building. Regular check ins that go beyond professional concerns, rotating leadership responsibilities to ensure everyone has a voice, and structured sharing of both challenges and successes help create the social cohesion necessary for successful long term operations in challenging environments. The innovations emerging from the Arctic night extend into unexpected domains. Psychologists studying the effects of isolation and darkness have developed new therapeutic approaches for treating seasonal depression and other light related disorders. Nutritionists examining the dietary needs of people living in extreme conditions have gained insights into metabolism and nutrient absorption that benefit patients worldwide. Sleep researchers analyzing the effects of disrupted circadian rhythms have contributed to our understanding of everything from jet lag to shift work disorders. Even seemingly simple innovations can have far reaching implications. The development of specialized clothing systems for Arctic conditions has influenced everything from athletic wear to spacesuits. The layering principles that keep researchers warm in minus 50-degree temperatures have been adapted for mountaineering gear, military uniforms, and protective equipment for workers in hazardous environments. Food preservation and preparation techniques developed for Arctic expeditions have found applications in emergency preparedness, camping equipment, and even high-end restaurant kitchens. The challenge of maintaining nutrition and morale through months of limited fresh ingredients has led to innovations in food science that benefit anyone dealing with dietary restrictions or food storage challenges. The Arctic night also serves as a testing ground for technologies that might one day be used in space exploration. The isolation, the extreme conditions, the need for absolute reliability in life support systems, and the psychological challenges of confined living situations all provide valuable analogs for long-duration space missions. Many of the lessons learned about human factors during Arctic expeditions are now being incorporated into planning for missions to Mars and beyond. As we continue to explore the mysteries of the polar night, we discover that darkness itself can be a catalyst for innovation. The absence of light forces us to develop new ways of seeing. The challenge of survival in harsh conditions pushes us to find creative solutions. The experience of genuine wilderness teaches us about our own capabilities and limitations. Most importantly, the shared experience of confronting the unknown together reminds us of our fundamental interconnectedness. Though innovations born from the Arctic night represent more than just technological achievements or scientific breakthroughs, they embody a particular approach to problem solving that emphasizes adaptation, cooperation, and respect for natural systems. They remind us that some of our most valuable insights come not from trying to dominate our environment, but from learning to work with it. And they demonstrate that even in the darkest, most challenging circumstances, human creativity and resilience can flourish. The Arctic night carries secrets older than our oldest stories, whispers of adaptation and resilience that echo through the crystalline air like ancient songs made of starlight and breath. As we continue our gentle exploration of this most extraordinary classroom, we find ourselves drawn deeper into the very essence of what makes life possible in a world where conventional wisdom suggests it simply shouldn't exist. Picture, if you will, the remarkable phenomenon of Arctic foxes as they navigate their frozen domain. These creatures, no larger than a house cat, possess an almost magical ability to transform themselves with the seasons. Their summer coats of brown and gray melt away like watercolors in rain, replaced by winter pelts so purely white they seem to have been woven from moonbeams themselves. But this transformation goes far beyond mere aesthetics. The winter coat is nearly twice as thick, creating an insulation system so efficient that these foxes can remain comfortable in temperatures that would challenge our most advanced outdoor gear. Their feet tell an even more fascinating story. The pads grow thick fur during winter months, creating natural snowshoes that distribute weight across soft snow while providing insulation from the frozen ground. These adaptations speak to something profound about life's capacity to not merely survive, but to flourish in conditions that seem impossibly harsh. The Arctic fox doesn't simply endure the polar night. It dances through it with an elegance that would make ballet dancers envious. Yet perhaps even more remarkable are the creatures we cannot see with our naked eyes, the microscopic inhabitants of this frozen realm who have mastered arts of survival that border on the miraculous. In the depths of Arctic soil, bacteria exist in a state that scientists call cryptobiosis, a kind of suspended animation where all metabolic processes slow to nearly imperceptible levels. These organisms can remain in this state for thousands of years, waiting patiently for conditions to improve, like sleeping beauties in a fairy tale written by physics and chemistry. Some of these microorganisms have developed antifreeze proteins, molecular compounds that prevent ice crystals from forming within their cellular structures. Think of it as nature's own version of automotive antifreeze, but infinitely more sophisticated. These proteins don't simply lower the freezing point of water, they actively reshape ice crystals as they form, creating smaller, less damaging structures that allow life to continue even when surrounded by ice. The implications of these discoveries ripple far beyond the Arctic itself. Medical researchers studying these antifreeze proteins have begun exploring their potential applications in organ preservation, imagining a future where organs for transplant could be stored safely for extended periods. The techniques that allow Arctic fish to swim beneath sheets of ice may one day help save human lives in operating rooms thousands of miles away from the nearest glacier. But the Arctic night offers lessons in adaptation that extend beyond the purely biological. The indigenous peoples of these regions have developed cultural and psychological adaptations that are equally remarkable, though perhaps less visible to casual observation. The Inuit concept of sila, often translated as weather or climate but encompassing something much deeper, reflects an understanding of the environment as a living, breathing entity with its own moods and rhythms. Traditional Arctic cultures developed sophisticated methods of timekeeping that had nothing to do with clocks or calendars. Instead, they read time in the behavior of animals, the quality of snow, the subtle shifts in wind patterns that spoke of changes to come. They learned to navigate by stars that remained constant when the sun disappeared for months, creating mental maps of impossible complexity that allowed them to travel vast distances across seemingly featureless landscapes. The social structures of these communities also adapted to the unique demands of Arctic life. During the long polar night, when hunting opportunities were limited and communities were confined to smaller spaces, elaborate storytelling traditions flourished. These weren't merely entertainment, they were sophisticated information systems that preserved knowledge about weather patterns, animal behavior, and survival techniques while also maintaining social cohesion during the most challenging months of the year. Modern research into seasonal affective patterns has revealed that many Arctic populations show remarkably lower rates of winter depression compared to people living at similar latitudes who lack these traditional cultural frameworks. It appears that cultural adaptation can be just as powerful as biological adaptation in helping humans thrive in extreme environments. The phenomenon of Arctic mirages adds another layer of wonder to this already extraordinary environment. During certain atmospheric conditions, light behaves in ways that seem to defy common sense, creating illusions that can make distant objects appear to float in midair or cause the horizon itself to bend and twist like something from a dream. These mirages aren't mere curiosities. They're the result of temperature gradients in the atmosphere that bend light rays in predictable but visually stunning ways. Inuit hunters learned to read these atmospheric distortions like a language, using them to locate breathing holes in sea ice from great distances or to spot polar bears against the white landscape. What might appear to an outsider as a confusing optical illusion became in skilled hands a sophisticated navigation and hunting tool. The aurora borealis, that magnificent light show we explored earlier, also plays a role in the practical life of Arctic communities. Traditional knowledge includes detailed observations about the relationship between aurora activity and weather patterns. Certain types of aurora displays were understood to predict specific wind conditions or temperature changes, information that could mean the difference between a successful hunting trip and a dangerous miscalculation. Modern science has confirmed many of these traditional observations, revealing that aurora activity is indeed connected to broader atmospheric patterns through mechanisms that indigenous observers somehow intuited without understanding the underlying physics. This speaks to something profound about human capacity for pattern recognition and adaptation, our ability to find meaning and utility in even the most otherworldly phenomena. The Arctic night also serves as a natural laboratory for understanding how light itself shapes life. In the depths of polar winter, when the sun doesn't rise for months, many Arctic animals shift their activity patterns in ways that reveal the deep connections between light exposure and biological rhythms. Reindeer, for example, appear to abandon traditional circadian rhythms entirely during the polar night, sleeping and waking in shorter, more flexible cycles that allow them to take advantage of feeding opportunities whenever they arise. This flexibility in biological timing challenges our assumptions about the universality of 24-hour cycles in living systems. It suggests that the circadian rhythms we consider fundamental to life may be more adaptable than we previously understood, opening new questions about how life might adapt to other extreme environments, perhaps even those we might encounter beyond Earth. The study of Arctic adaptation has profound implications for our understanding of climate resilience more broadly. As global climate patterns shift and change, the strategies that life has developed to thrive in the Arctic may become increasingly relevant to survival in other environments. The metabolic flexibility of Arctic mammals, the social structures of polar communities, the technological innovations born from extreme necessity, all of these represent potential models for adaptation in an uncertain future. Scientists working in the Arctic often describe a sense of humility that comes from witnessing life's tenacity in such challenging conditions. The Arctic night strips away many of the assumptions we carry about what life requires, revealing instead a story of remarkable creativity and resilience. Every breath of vapor in the frigid air, every track in the snow, every flash of aurora light speaks to the profound truth that life finds a way, not through brute force or dominance, but through patience, adaptation, and an almost artistic creativity in solving the puzzles that environment presents. As we stand at the edge of this vast, dark, and impossibly beautiful classroom, we're reminded that the Arctic night is not empty or barren, but rather full of lessons about the fundamental nature of existence itself. It teaches us that survival is not about conquering harsh conditions, but about learning to dance with them, finding rhythm and beauty even in the most challenging circumstances. The quiet mind in all of us finds deep comfort in these stories of adaptation and resilience. They remind us that challenges, whether environmental, personal, or global, are not insurmountable obstacles, but opportunities for creativity, growth, and discovery. The Arctic night, in all its mysterious beauty, whispers gently that even in the darkest times, life finds remarkable ways to not merely endure, but to flourish. As the Arctic night deepens, transforming the polar landscape into a theater of remarkable biological innovation, we encounter one of nature's most extraordinary survival strategies, the art of slowing down time itself. In the most remote corners of our planet, where temperatures plummet to levels that would stop most life in its tracks, a quiet revolution unfolds. Here, beneath layers of permafrost and within crystalline formations older than recorded history, microscopic organisms have discovered something remarkable. They have learned to pause. This is the world of cryptobiosis, a state so profound that it challenges our very understanding of what it means to be alive. The word itself comes from Greek, meaning hidden life, and it describes a biological phenomenon where organisms enter a state of suspended animation so complete that all metabolic processes essentially cease. They do not breathe, they do not grow, they do not age. They simply wait, sometimes for decades, sometimes for centuries, occasionally for millennia. In the Arctic's frozen embrace, tardigrades, those microscopic water bears we've come to know as nature's ultimate survivors, demonstrate this biological time travel with stunning elegance. When conditions become too harsh, when water disappears and temperatures drop beyond tolerance, these tiny creatures curl into themselves, expelling nearly all moisture from their bodies until they contain less than 3% water. In this desiccated state, they become something approaching the inorganic, a biological crystal that can survive the vacuum of space, crushing pressures, and radiation levels that would destroy most complex life forms. But tardigrades are not alone in this frozen waiting room. The Arctic soil harbors bacteria that have mastered the art of geological patience. Scientists have discovered viable bacterial spores in permafrost layers that have remained frozen for over 500,000 years. When these ancient microorganisms are carefully thawed and provided with nutrients, they spring back to life as if no time has passed at all. They carry within them genetic memories of Earth's climate from eras when our planet looked entirely different, when ice sheets extended far beyond their current boundaries, and when the atmospheric composition bore little resemblance to today's air. These discoveries have revolutionized our understanding of life's boundaries and opened entirely new fields of scientific inquiry. Astrobiologists now study Arctic cryptobiosis as a model for how life might survive on Mars or Europa, Jupiter's ice-covered moon. If organisms can remain viable in Earth's most extreme frozen environments for hundreds of thousands of years, what might be possible on worlds where winter lasts not months, but geological epochs? The mechanisms behind this biological time stopping are as elegant as they are complex. Some organisms produce specialized proteins that act as cellular antifreeze, preventing ice crystals from forming within their tissues. Others manufacture trehalose, a sugar that replaces water in cellular structures, essentially mummifying the organism from within while preserving its essential architecture. Still others alter their cellular membranes, making them more flexible and resistant to the mechanical damage that freezing typically causes. Perhaps most remarkably, some Arctic organisms have developed the ability to repair themselves after cryptobiosis. When conditions improve and they begin to reactivate, they possess molecular machinery capable of fixing any DNA damage that accumulated during their suspended state. It's as if they carry their own repair kits, allowing them to emerge from centuries of dormancy as healthy and viable as when they first entered their biological pause. This suspended animation isn't merely about survival, it's about timing. Many Arctic organisms use cryptobiosis strategically, entering dormancy not just when conditions become impossible, but when they become merely unfavorable. They've learned to read environmental cues with extraordinary precision, sensing minute changes in temperature, humidity, or chemical composition that signal the approach of harsh conditions. In essence, they've become biological fortune tellers, predicting the future and preparing accordingly. The study of cryptobiosis has practical implications that extend far beyond academic curiosity. Medical researchers are investigating how these natural preservation mechanisms might be applied to organ transplantation, potentially allowing organs to be stored for extended periods without degradation. Agricultural scientists are exploring how crop plants might be engineered with cryptobiotic capabilities, creating drought-resistant varieties that could survive extreme weather events by entering temporary dormancy. In the pharmaceutical industry, the stability of cryptobiotic organisms has inspired new methods for preserving vaccines and medications without refrigeration, potentially revolutionizing healthcare delivery in remote or resource limited areas. The proteins and compounds that enable cryptobiosis are being studied as the basis for new preservation technologies that could transform everything from food storage to space exploration. But perhaps the most profound implication of cryptobiosis research lies in what it reveals about the nature of time itself, at least from a biological perspective. These organisms demonstrate that life and time are not as inextricably linked as we might assume. They show us that existence can be paused, stored, and resumed, that the flow of biological time can be controlled and manipulated through entirely natural processes. As we stand at the edge of the Arctic night, watching the aurora dance across a sky filled with more stars than most of us ever see, we're reminded that the most extraordinary discoveries often come from the most extreme places. In the frozen silence of the polar regions, where life slows to an almost imperceptible whisper, we find organisms that have mastered something we've long considered impossible: the ability to step outside the stream of time and wait for a better moment to exist. These tiny time travelers, invisible to the naked eye but profound in their implications, continue their patient vigil beneath the ice. They remind us that life's greatest innovations often emerge not from speed or aggression, but from patience, adaptation, and the wisdom to know when to wait. In their suspended state, they embody a kind of biological hope, a faith that conditions will improve and that their moment to flourish will come again. As we've journeyed through the endless nights of the Arctic, explored the remarkable adaptations of life in darkness, and witnessed the profound wisdom that emerges from the world's most challenging environments, we arrive at a moment of quiet revelation. Here, in the depths of the polar night, science becomes something more than observation and measurement. It becomes a pathway to understanding resilience itself. The researchers who brave these conditions, setting up their instruments under starlit skies and aurora painted heavens, are modern explorers of a different kind. They're not seeking new lands or claiming territories. They're hunting for insights that could transform how we understand life, survival, and the intricate dance between organisms and their environment. Every data point collected in the Arctic night represents hours of patient work in conditions that would send most of us running for the nearest heated building and a cup of hot chocolate. Consider the extraordinary dedication required to study the mating calls of Arctic foxes at -40 degrees, or to track the migration patterns of caribou across landscapes so vast and white they seem to stretch into infinity. These scientists often work in teams, sharing body heat, resources, and the quiet companionship that comes from understanding that out here, cooperation isn't just beneficial, it's essential for survival. They've learned what indigenous peoples have known for millennia: that the Arctic teaches patience, humility, and the art of finding beauty in the most unlikely places. The discoveries emerging from this research are reshaping entire fields of study. Biologists studying Arctic plants have found species that can photosynthesize at light levels so low they were once thought impossible for plant survival. These findings aren't just academic curiosities, they're potential blueprints for developing crops that could grow in extreme conditions, perhaps even in space habitats or on other planets. The Arctic night, it turns out, is a laboratory for understanding the future of life itself. Medical researchers, too, have found treasures hidden in the polar darkness. The study of how Arctic animals regulate their body temperature and metabolism during extreme cold has led to breakthroughs in treating hypothermia and developing new surgical techniques. Some Arctic fish produce natural antifreeze proteins that prevent ice crystals from forming in their blood, discoveries that have applications in organ preservation and even ice cream manufacturing. The polar night gives generously to those patient enough to listen to its secrets. Perhaps most remarkably, the psychological studies conducted during the Arctic night have revealed profound insights about human resilience and mental health. Researchers living in isolated stations for months at a time have provided data about how communities form, how leadership emerges under stress, and how humans can maintain hope and creativity even when surrounded by seemingly endless darkness. These findings inform everything from astronaut training to urban planning, helping us design spaces and communities that support human well being even in challenging circumstances. The technology developed for Arctic research has also found its way into everyday life. GPS systems, satellite communications, and weather forecasting all owe debts to innovations first tested in the harsh conditions of the polar night. When you check your phone for tomorrow's weather or use navigation to find your way home, you're benefiting from technologies that were refined under the northern lights by scientists who needed to communicate across vast, frozen distances. Climate researchers working in the Arctic night have become our planet's early warning system. The ice cores they extract from ancient glaciers contain records of Earth's climate history spanning hundreds of thousands of years. By analyzing the composition of air bubbles trapped in ice formed during different historical periods, they can reconstruct past climates with remarkable precision. This work has revealed the natural rhythms of our planet's climate and helped us understand how human activities are altering these ancient patterns. The indigenous communities who call the Arctic home have become invaluable partners in this research. Their traditional knowledge, passed down through generations of living in harmony with the polar environment, provides context and wisdom that no amount of high-tech equipment can replicate. They can read the behavior of ice, predict weather patterns from the movement of clouds, and understand the subtle signals that indicate when seasons are shifting. Collaborative research projects that combine traditional knowledge with modern scientific methods are producing insights neither approach could achieve alone. The Arctic night has also become a classroom for understanding cooperation and resource sharing. Research stations, as scattered across the polar landscape, often share equipment, expertise, and even personnel. When one station's generator fails or supplies run low, neighboring stations hundreds of miles away coordinate rescue missions. These networks of mutual support have created informal universities of Arctic survival, where knowledge flows freely between researchers from different countries, disciplines, and backgrounds. As our exploration of the Arctic night draws toward its close, we're left with a profound sense of wonder at the resilience of life and the ingenuity of those who study it. The darkness that once seemed forbidding has revealed itself to be full of light in the form of aurora displays, reflected starlight on snow, and the warm glow of understanding that comes from patient observation and careful thought. The cold that seemed hostile has shown us new forms of adaptation and survival that expand our definition of what life can accomplish. The silence of the polar night has taught us to listen more carefully, not just to the subtle sounds of wind and ice, but to the deeper rhythms of our planet and the quiet persistence of life in all its forms. In learning to thrive in the Arctic night, we've discovered new dimensions of human potential and gained tools for facing the challenges that await us in an uncertain future. As you sit quietly in the darkness of the Arctic night, wrapped in layers of warmth against the bone-deep cold, there's something almost mystical about the way silence transforms into story. The indigenous communities of the North have understood this for millennia, their elders gathering families close during the endless winter months, voices weaving tales that carry more than entertainment. They carry survival, wisdom, and the delicate threads that bind generations together in this most unforgiving of places. These stories, passed down through countless Arctic nights, are not merely folklore, they are sophisticated knowledge systems, encoded in narrative that teach everything from navigation techniques to weather prediction, from the behavioral patterns of animals to the subtle signs that indicate safe ice versus dangerous ice. When an Inuit grandmother tells her grandchildren about Sedna, the sea goddess, she is simultaneously teaching them about ocean currents, marine life cycles, and the interconnectedness of all Arctic existence. The story becomes a vessel carrying practical knowledge wrapped in memorable, emotional packaging. In the soft glow of oil lamps or the gentle flicker of modern lighting, these storytelling sessions create something profound. They transform the harsh isolation of Arctic winter into intimate connection. The darkness outside, which might otherwise feel oppressive, becomes a protective cocoon that enhances the warmth and closeness within. Children learn not just facts, but how to think about their environment, how to read the subtle language of wind and snow, how to understand the rhythms of a world that operates on cycles far longer than human memory. The stories themselves are marvels of efficient information transfer. A single tale might contain instructions for building emergency shelters, identifying edible plants during brief summer months, understanding the migration patterns of caribou, and recognizing the signs of approaching storms. But because these lessons are embedded in narrative, with characters and emotions and dramatic tension, they stick in memory far more effectively than simple instruction ever could. The mind, it seems, is wired for story, and the Arctic communities have understood this for thousands of years. Modern cognitive science is only now beginning to appreciate what these indigenous knowledge keepers have long known. Stories create what researchers call elaborative encoding, where information becomes linked to multiple neural pathways through emotional content, sensory details, and narrative structure. When you hear about the hunter who survived a blizzard by reading the behavior of his sled dogs, you're not just learning about dog behavior, you're encoding that information alongside the emotions of fear, hope, and relief, alongside the sensory details of wind and cold, alongside the narrative structure that helps you remember the sequence of events. The Arctic night provides the perfect setting for this kind of deep learning. With limited visual distractions and the enforced stillness that comes with extreme cold, attention naturally turns inward and toward each other. The human voice becomes the primary medium of connection, And in that focused attention, stories can work their quiet magic. There's something about darkness that makes us more receptive to narrative, more willing to let our analytical minds rest, and allow stories to settle into deeper layers of consciousness. These storytelling traditions also serve as remarkable archives of environmental knowledge. Stories told today contain observations about ice conditions, weather patterns, and animal behavior that stretch back centuries. They represent a form of citizen science that predates formal scientific methodology by thousands of years, yet maintains remarkable accuracy and detail. When elders speak of ice that sings before it breaks, they're describing acoustic phenomena that modern researchers are only beginning to understand. When they tell stories about the subtle changes in aurora patterns that predict weather shifts, they're sharing observational data collected over lifetimes of careful attention. The social function of these stories extends beyond knowledge transfer. They create and reinforce community bonds, establish shared values, and provide frameworks for understanding difficult experiences. In the Arctic, where survival often depends on cooperation and mutual support, stories that emphasize community solidarity, resource sharing, and collective responsibility become essential social infrastructure. They don't just entertain, they literally help hold communities together through the challenging months of darkness and cold. Perhaps most remarkably, these stories demonstrate an understanding of time that differs profoundly from modern Western perspectives. Rather than viewing time as linear progression, many Arctic narratives treat time as cyclical, with events and patterns repeating across seasons, years, and generations. This temporal perspective proves remarkably well suited to life in an environment governed by powerful natural cycles. Stories help people understand their place, not just in physical space, but in the great turning wheel of Arctic time. The language used in these stories often reflects the unique relationship between Arctic peoples and their environment. Inuit languages, for example, contain dozens of words for different types of snow and ice, each describing specific conditions that carry important survival information. When these precise terms appear in stories, they're not just vocabulary lessons, they're detailed environmental briefings disguised as entertainment. The stories become vehicles for maintaining linguistic precision that could literally mean the difference between life and death. In our modern world of instant communication and global connectivity, there's something deeply moving about these intimate circles of storytelling in the Arctic night. They remind us that some of humanity's most important knowledge isn't stored in databases or libraries, but in the living memory of communities, passed from voice to voice, heart to heart, through the simple but powerful act of sharing stories in the darkness. As climate change brings unprecedented shifts to the Arctic, these traditional stories are taking on new urgency. They contain baseline environmental knowledge that stretches back far beyond the reach of instrumental records, offering crucial insights into natural variability and long-term environmental patterns. Scientists are increasingly recognizing the value of traditional ecological knowledge, and some of the most important climate research now involves collaboration between researchers and indigenous knowledge holders, bridging different ways of understanding and different ways of knowing. Tonight, in communities scattered across the Arctic, elders are still gathering families close, still sharing the ancient stories that carry forward the accumulated wisdom of countless generations. In the gentle light of modern homes, surrounded by the vast darkness of the polar night, these voices continue the timeless work of transformation, turning silence into story, isolation into connection, and the harsh realities of Arctic life into the enduring warmth of shared human understanding. The stories continue, as they always have, weaving threads of knowledge and connection through the long, beautiful darkness of the Arctic night. The Arctic night stretches endlessly before us, a canvas of darkness so profound that it challenges everything we thought we knew about time, resilience, and the very essence of life itself. Here in this frozen theater, where the sun refuses to rise for months on end, we discover something extraordinary happening beneath the surface, something that might just change how we understand survival, adaptation, and the delicate dance between light and shadow. You see, the prolonged darkness of the Arctic winter creates a unique laboratory, a place where life doesn't simply endure, but actually transforms. While we've explored how humans and animals adapt to this endless night, there's another story unfolding, one written in ice crystals and whispered by the wind. It's the story of how darkness itself becomes a teacher, showing us that absence can be just as powerful as presence, that emptiness can be just as fertile as abundance. Consider for a moment the indigenous peoples of the Arctic who have developed what scientists now recognize as one of the most sophisticated understandings of time and space on our planet. Their languages contain dozens of words for different types of snow, different qualities of ice, different moods of darkness. But perhaps most remarkably, they've developed temporal concepts that don't exist in our modern understanding. There's a word in some Inuit dialects that roughly translates to the time when darkness teaches, referring to those deep winter months when the community turns inward, when stories are told, when the accumulated wisdom of generations is passed down like precious cargo. During these storytelling marathons, something fascinating happens to the human brain. Neuroscientists studying Arctic communities have discovered that prolonged periods of narrative engagement, particularly in low light conditions, trigger what they call enhanced consolidation states. The brain, deprived of the usual visual stimuli, begins to process information differently. Memory centers become more active, pattern recognition sharpens, and the boundaries between individual and collective memory begin to blur. It's as if the darkness creates a shared cognitive space where stories don't just entertain, but actually rewire neural pathways. This phenomenon extends beyond storytelling into practical skills as well. Arctic hunters develop what researchers term proprioceptive excellence, an almost supernatural awareness of their body's position in space. In complete darkness, they can navigate across featureless ice, track animals by the subtlest changes in wind patterns, and read the landscape through their feet alone. Their brains compensate for the absence of light by creating incredibly detailed mental maps, three-dimensional models of their environment that remain accurate across vast distances and long periods of time. But perhaps the most intriguing discovery is how the Arctic night affects creativity and problem solving. Artists, writers, and inventors who spend extended periods in polar darkness often report what they describe as breakthrough states, moments of clarity and innovation that seem to emerge from the depths of the endless night. There's something about the sensory deprivation, the forced stillness, the way darkness strips away distractions, that allows the mind to make connections it might never make under normal circumstances. Scientists studying this phenomenon have identified what they call dark adaptation creativity, a measurable increase in divergent thinking and novel problem solving that occurs after several weeks of limited light exposure. The brain, it seems, doesn't just adapt to darkness by becoming more sensitive to available light. It actually begins to generate new patterns of thought, new ways of processing information, new approaches to understanding the world. This has profound implications for how we think about innovation and discovery. In our modern world, we often equate progress with acceleration, with more light, more stimulation, more input. But the Arctic night suggests that sometimes the most profound breakthroughs come from the opposite direction, from stillness, from darkness, from the patient cultivation of inner vision when outer vision fails us. The ice itself becomes a collaborator in this process. Arctic ice isn't the static, uniform surface we might imagine. It's a living, breathing entity that expands and contracts with temperature changes, creating a symphony of sounds that Arctic dwellers learn to read like a complex musical score. The ice speaks in groans and whispers, in sharp cracks that echo across miles, and subtle shifts that only the most experienced can detect. This acoustic landscape becomes another form of navigation, another way of understanding space and time when traditional visual cues are absent. Researchers have documented cases of Arctic residents who can predict weather changes days in advance simply by listening to the ice. They've developed an intuitive understanding of how sound travels through frozen water, how temperature affects acoustic properties, how the voice of the ice changes with the seasons. It's a form of environmental literacy that goes far beyond anything we learn in temperate climates, a deep intimacy with the natural world that can only develop in conditions of extreme simplicity and apparent emptiness. And then there are the children born and raised in this environment, the young minds that develop entirely within the rhythm of the Arctic night. These children show remarkable adaptations that scientists are only beginning to understand. Their circadian rhythms develop differently. Their spatial reasoning abilities often exceed standardized test expectations, and their capacity for sustained attention in low stimulation environments is extraordinary. They've learned to find richness in subtlety, complexity in simplicity, abundance in scarcity. The Arctic night, it turns out, isn't just a season to be endured. It's a master class in adaptation, a tutorial in resilience, a demonstration of how life finds ways to not just survive, but thrive in conditions that would seem to prohibit flourishing altogether. The darkness teaches patience, the cold teaches conservation, the isolation teaches the value of community, and the apparent emptiness teaches us to look deeper, to listen more carefully, to find treasure in places we never thought to search. As we conclude our journey through the Arctic night, we're left with a profound realization. This landscape of extremes, this theater of darkness and endurance, holds up a mirror to our own capacity for adaptation and growth. It reminds us that some of the most important discoveries happen not in laboratories filled with bright lights and sophisticated equipment, but in quiet places where we're forced to rely on our most fundamental human capacities: observation, intuition, patience, and wonder. The reflective scientist in all of us awakens in places like this, in moments of stillness and apparent emptiness, when we stop filling every silence with noise and start listening to what the darkness has to teach. The Arctic night whispers its secrets to those patient enough to listen, brave enough to embrace the unknown, and wise enough to understand that sometimes the most profound learning happens when we stop trying so hard to see and start learning how to truly perceive. As we step deeper into the Arctic night, we find ourselves immersed in a world where survival isn't just about enduring the cold or navigating the darkness. It's about understanding the profound ways this environment shapes not only the creatures that call it home, but the very fabric of human consciousness itself. The Arctic night becomes a laboratory for the mind, a place where our psychological boundaries are tested, stretched, and ultimately transformed in ways that reveal fundamental truths about human nature. The prolonged darkness of the Arctic winter creates a unique psychological landscape that challenges our most basic assumptions about time, awareness, and mental well being. For those who experience the polar night, that period when the sun doesn't rise for weeks or months, the absence of natural light triggers a cascade of neurological and psychological adaptations that scientists are only beginning to understand. It's not simply a matter of seasonal depression or disrupted sleep patterns, though those certainly occur. Instead, the Arctic night initiates a deeper reconfiguration of consciousness itself. Consider the phenomenon that researchers call Arctic lucidity, a heightened state of mental clarity that some experience during the deepest periods of polar night. Far from the mental fog one might expect from prolonged darkness, many Arctic residents report episodes of extraordinary cognitive sharpness, enhanced creativity, and profound introspective insights. The brain, deprived of its usual circadian anchors, begins to operate in entirely different rhythms, accessing states of consciousness that remain largely hidden in more temperate climates. This cognitive transformation manifests in remarkable ways. Artists working in Arctic conditions often describe a unique quality of inspiration that emerges from the darkness. The absence of visual stimulation from the external world seems to amplify the internal landscape of imagination and memory. Writers speak of narratives that unfold with unprecedented clarity, as if the stories were being illuminated by some inner aurora. Musicians discover harmonies and rhythms that mirror the subtle sounds of the Arctic environment. The whisper of wind across snow, the distant crack of shifting ice, the profound silence that feels almost musical in its completeness. The psychological effects extend beyond creativity into the realm of memory and perception. Many who spend extended periods in Arctic darkness report experiencing what psychologists term enhanced autobiographical recall. Memories from childhood, long buried experiences, and forgotten dreams resurface with startling vividness. It's as if the darkness serves as a kind of psychological archaeology, excavating layers of personal history that remain inaccessible under normal circumstances. This phenomenon suggests that our usual relationship with memory may be more dependent on environmental cues than we realize. Sleep itself becomes fundamentally altered in the Arctic night, not just in duration, but in quality and structure. Without the natural light-dark cycle to regulate circadian rhythms, sleep patterns fragment and reorganize into something entirely new. Some individuals develop what researchers call polyphasic sleep adaptation, naturally falling into multiple shorter sleep periods throughout the day rather than one extended nighttime rest. These alternative sleep patterns often coincide with increased dream recall and more frequent lucid dreaming experiences. The dreams that emerge during Arctic winter are particularly noteworthy for their intensity and symbolic richness. Many report dreams filled with light, warmth, and vivid colors that seem to compensate for the sensory deprivation of the waking world. Others describe prophetic or deeply meaningful dreams that provide guidance or insight into personal challenges. The boundary between dreaming and waking consciousness becomes more permeable, with some individuals experiencing what anthropologists call shamanic consciousness, a state of awareness that traditional Arctic cultures have long recognized and cultivated. This blurring of consciousness boundaries extends to the phenomenon of Arctic telepathy. Anecdotal reports of enhanced intuitive connection between individuals sharing the polar night experience. While scientifically unverified, these accounts persist across cultures and generations, suggesting that the extreme environment may facilitate forms of nonverbal communication or empathic connection that remain dormant under normal circumstances. Whether explained by heightened sensitivity to subtle social cues or genuine extrasensory phenomena, these experiences point to the profound ways Arctic darkness can alter our perception of the boundaries between self and other. The sensory deprivation of the Arctic night also use remarkable compensatory enhancements in other senses. Hearing becomes extraordinarily acute, with individuals able to detect sounds across vast distances and distinguish between different types of snow simply by the way it sounds underfoot. Touch sensitivity increases dramatically, allowing for navigation and object identification through minimal contact. Smell and taste become more refined, capable of detecting subtle variations in air quality, weather patterns, and even the emotional states of other people through barely perceptible chemical cues. These sensory adaptations connect to a broader phenomenon that researchers call Arctic synesthesia, where the prolonged darkness seems to facilitate cross-sensory experiences. Sounds take on visual qualities, with many reporting the ability to see voices or environmental sounds as colors and patterns. Temperature variations are experienced as musical tones or textural sensations that extend beyond the purely physical. This neurological plasticity demonstrates the remarkable capacity of the human brain to reorganize itself in response to extreme environmental conditions. The psychological journey through Arctic night often follows a predictable pattern that mirrors classical descriptions of spiritual or mystical transformation. The initial phase typically involves disorientation and anxiety as familiar psychological anchors disappear. This is followed by a period of adjustment where new rhythms and awareness patterns begin to emerge. The deepest phase of winter often brings what many describe as a profound sense of peace and connection to something larger than themselves, a feeling of being held by the darkness rather than threatened by it. This transformation process culminates in what psychologists studying Arctic populations call darkness wisdom, a form of psychological resilience and insight that emerges specifically from extended exposure to polar night conditions. Individuals who successfully navigate the psychological challenges of Arctic darkness often report lasting changes in their relationship to fear, solitude, and uncertainty. They develop what researchers term darkness confidence, an ability to remain calm and centered in situations that would typically provoke anxiety or panic. The return of light after months of darkness triggers its own psychological phenomena. Rather than simple relief or joy, many experience what's known as light shock, a period of adjustment where the returning sun feels almost overwhelming after the gentle intimacy of prolonged darkness. Some report a sense of loss or grief for the unique consciousness states that the darkness facilitated. This suggests that the psychological adaptations to Arctic night aren't merely coping mechanisms, but represent genuine alternative ways of being that have their own value and beauty. These psychological transformations have profound implications for understanding human consciousness more broadly. The Arctic night reveals that our normal waking consciousness, so dependent on light and regular circadian rhythms, represents only one possible configuration of human awareness. The alternatives that emerge in polar darkness suggest vast untapped potentials within human psychology, dormant capacities that remain largely unexplored in our light-saturated modern world. The wisdom that emerges from Arctic darkness offers valuable insights for contemporary psychological healing and growth. The enforced solitude and sensory simplification of polar night create conditions similar to those cultivated in contemplative traditions worldwide. The difference is that in the Arctic, these states arise naturally from environmental conditions rather than deliberate spiritual practice. This suggests that darkness itself may be a profound teacher, offering lessons about consciousness, resilience, and the hidden capacities of the human mind that remain largely forgotten in our increasingly illuminated world. As we prepare to leave this exploration of the Arctic night's psychological dimensions, we carry with us a deeper appreciation for the profound ways that darkness can serve, not as an absence to be feared, but as a presence to be embraced. The Arctic night reminds us that within the apparent emptiness of darkness lies a fullness of possibility, a vast inner landscape waiting to be discovered by those brave enough to journey into the depths of winter's embrace. As we begin to close this chapter of our journey through the Arctic night, we find ourselves standing at a threshold, not of ending, but of deepening understanding. The polar darkness we've explored together has revealed itself to be far more than absence or emptiness. It has shown us worlds within worlds, adaptations beyond imagination, and wisdom that emerges only in the profound quiet of the endless night. The Arctic teaches us that darkness is not the enemy of life, but its patient teacher. In the cryptobiotic pause of the tardigrade, in the patient hunting of the polar bear, in the ancient stories told around fires that burn against the cold, we see that survival is not merely about enduring, but about transforming, adapting, and finding unexpected beauty in the most challenging circumstances. Throughout our exploration, we've witnessed how the extreme conditions of the Arctic night have fostered innovations that reach far beyond the frozen landscape. The antifreeze proteins that keep fish swimming in sub-zero waters now inspire medical preservation techniques. The architectural wisdom of the igloo influences modern sustainable building design. The social structures that allow communities to thrive in isolation offer lessons for our increasingly connected, yet often lonely world. Perhaps most remarkably, we've discovered that the Arctic night is not silent, but singing. It hums with the aurora's electromagnetic symphony, whispers with the movement of ice, and resonates with the calls of creatures who have learned to navigate by sound and instinct rather than sight. This is a landscape that has taught its inhabitants, both human and animal, to develop senses we barely knew existed, to find their way by magnetism and starlight, to read the subtle signs that spell the difference between safety and peril. The indigenous peoples of the Arctic have understood these lessons for millennia. Their languages contain dozens of words for different types of snow and ice. Their stories encode survival wisdom in mythological form, and their traditional practices demonstrate a profound understanding of how to live in harmony with an environment that might seem hostile to outsiders. They have shown us that the Arctic night is not a void to be conquered, but a teacher to be respected, a partner in the ancient dance of adaptation and resilience. In the realm of science, the Arctic continues to surprise us. The discovery of extremophile organisms thriving in conditions once thought impossible has expanded our understanding of where life might exist, both on Earth and beyond. The ice cores that preserve thousands of years of atmospheric history serve as libraries of climate data, while the unique properties of permafrost and polar ice offer insights into everything from carbon storage to the history of our planet's magnetic field. The psychological and spiritual dimensions of the Arctic night have proven equally profound. The phenomenon of polar night syndrome, the way extended darkness affects human circadian rhythms and mental states, has led to breakthroughs in understanding seasonal depression and the importance of light therapy. Yet we've also seen how some find in the polar night a meditative quality, a space for introspection and renewal that our bright, busy world rarely provides. The aurora borealis, that ethereal dance of light across the polar sky, stands as perhaps the most perfect metaphor for what the Arctic night teaches us. Here is beauty born from the collision between solar wind and magnetic field, between the energy of space and the protection of atmosphere. The aurora reminds us that even in the deepest darkness, even in the most extreme conditions, the universe continues to create moments of breathtaking wonder. As climate change brings new attention to the Arctic, we're learning that this remote region is intimately connected to weather patterns, ocean currents, and ecological systems across the globe. The polar night is not just a local phenomenon, but part of the planetary rhythm that influences life everywhere. The melting of Arctic ice affects sea levels worldwide, while changes in polar air currents can alter weather patterns thousands of miles away. Yet even as we recognize the Arctic's vulnerability to rapid environmental change, we also see its incredible capacity for adaptation and resilience. The organisms that have learned to thrive in these conditions carry within their cells and behaviors the accumulated wisdom of millions of years of evolution. They represent a kind of biological archive, a living library of strategies for surviving and thriving in extreme conditions. The technologies and innovations inspired by Arctic adaptations continue to evolve. From biomimetic materials that replicate the properties of polar bear fur to architectural designs based on snow crystal structures, the Arctic night continues to inspire human creativity and ingenuity. Medical researchers study the hibernation patterns of Arctic mammals to develop new approaches to surgery and critical care, while engineers examine the efficiency of penguin colonies to design better heating and cooling systems. In the field of space exploration, the Arctic serves as Earth's closest analog to the conditions astronauts might encounter on other worlds. The isolation, the extreme temperatures, the need for complete self sufficiency, and the psychological challenges of living in confined spaces for extended periods all mirror the challenges of long duration space missions. The wisdom gained from studying how humans and other organisms adapt to the Arctic night directly informs our preparations for exploring the darkness of space. The cultural and artistic expressions that emerge from the Arctic night remind us that human creativity flourishes even in the most challenging environments. The intricate patterns of Inuit art, the haunting melodies of traditional polar songs, and the rich oral traditions that preserve knowledge across generations all demonstrate that culture and beauty are not luxuries, but necessities, essential elements of human resilience and adaptation. As we prepare to leave this exploration of the Arctic night, we carry with us its essential lessons. We've learned that adaptation is not just about survival, but about transformation, about finding new ways to thrive in conditions that initially seem impossible. We've seen that innovation often emerges from constraint, that the greatest breakthroughs come from learning to work with rather than against the natural world. The Arctic night has taught us patience, showing us that some of nature's most important processes happen slowly, quietly, over timescales that dwarf human lifespans. It has demonstrated the value of community, the way organisms from bacteria to polar bears form cooperative relationships that enable survival in harsh conditions. It has revealed the importance of cycles, the way life in the Arctic is synchronized with the rhythm of seasons, the dance of light and darkness that governs the polar year. Perhaps most importantly, the Arctic night has shown us that darkness itself can be generative, creative, nurturing. In a world that often equates darkness with danger or emptiness, the polar night offers a different perspective. Here, darkness is the space where the aurora dances, where deep sleep restores and renews, where the quiet concentration necessary for the most delicate adaptations can take place. As our journey through the secrets of the Arctic night draws to a close, we're reminded that every ending is also a beginning. The knowledge we've gained, the perspectives we've explored, and the sense of wonder we've cultivated don't disappear with the final word, but continue to grow and evolve, like seeds planted in the fertile darkness of winter, waiting for the right moment to sprout and bloom. The Arctic night remains, vast and patient, and full of secrets yet to be discovered. It continues its ancient work of teaching adaptation, fostering resilience, and creating beauty in the most unexpected places. And perhaps in our own lives, when we encounter our own dark nights of challenge and uncertainty, we can remember the lessons of the polar darkness, that in apparent emptiness there is often hidden richness, that in silence there can be profound communication, and that in the deepest darkness we sometimes find the most brilliant light. So as you drift off tonight, wherever you are in the world, remember the Arctic night and all it has taught us. Remember that darkness can be a teacher, that cold can inspire warmth, that isolation can foster the deepest connections. Remember that adaptation is always possible, that resilience can be learned, and that even in the most challenging circumstances, life finds a way not just to survive, but to flourish, creating beauty and wonder that illuminates the darkness for all who have eyes to see. Sleep well, fellow traveler, knowing that somewhere in the vast Arctic night, the aurora continues its eternal dance, the polar bears continue their patient hunt, and the ancient ice continues to sing its quiet song of endurance and hope. The night is vast, but you are not alone, and in the morning, whether it comes in hours or months, there will be light again, made all the more precious by the darkness that came before.